And one of them is, well, what does it mean that people are up to something? What does it mean that they're aiming at something? Accordingly, I do not believe that an impulse to knowledge is the father of philosophy, but that another impulse, here as elsewhere, has only made use of knowledge and mistaken knowledge as an instrument. But whoever considers the fundamental impulses of man with a view to determining how far they may have here acted as inspiring... Now, this is partly why this is going to require editing. It's so complicated to go through. Accordingly, I do not believe that an impulse to knowledge is the father of philosophy, but that another impulse, here as elsewhere, has only made use of knowledge and mistaken knowledge as an instrument. All right, so let's take that apart. Accordingly, I do not believe that an impulse to knowledge is the father of philosophy. So one of the claims, I suppose this would be an Enlightenment claim, is that people do have a drive to knowledge, and that that drive is, in fact, what underlies the production of such things as philosophy. But Nietzsche questions that, because he's trying to bring us back to consideration of the fact that you can't separate the philosopher's mind from the philosopher's being. He's first and foremost a living creature, and he's up to something. And the question is, what is it that he's up to? And so you can see the earliest manifestations in a paragraph like this of what later developed into deconstructionist thought. And that was mostly French continental philosophers who pursued that particular line of reasoning. And it is derived exactly from this kind of statement by Nietzsche. So, for example, someone like Derrida would say, it doesn't matter what the content of the text is. What matters is that the text can be used as a tool for power. And that whether the person who wrote the text knew it or not, that's what they were doing. And they were doing it in a way to privilege themselves above other people. And that's really, I would say, the fundamental deconstructionist claim. And it's a powerful claim. It's an utterly corrupt claim. But it's a really powerful claim, and it's related directly to the sorts of things that Nietzsche was referring to in this paragraph. What is it that the person's truly up to? Now, the problem with the deconstructionist claim is that it's an open invitation to cynicism, to thoughtless cynicism. I can just make the presupposition that whatever it is that you're telling me, you're telling me merely to dominate, regardless of what it is that you claim to be doing. Well, the problem with that approach is that it's predicated on the implicit assumption that the only value that people actually have is the desire to dominate. And of course that's a purely, that could be the case, and I also think that it's even reasonable to posit that to some degree that it is the case. But to take that from a contributing factor and to make that the highest God, because that's essentially what the deconstructionists are doing, those are entirely different things. And you have to beware of people who take a single causal element and elevate it to the stature of single comprehensive cause. You know, it's more reasonable to assume that people are complex in their motivations and that many different strands of biological and cultural motivation are in some sense primary, and that what happens is that they come together to weave a kind of tapestry, rather than to make the automatic assumption that you can reduce the entire set of human motivations to a single principle, like that of power. Now, you know, I would say Nietzsche is also responsible to some degree for the deconstructionist claim that it's power, because one of his most famous utterances was that the fundamental motivating force in life is the will to power. But he wasn't so much, because Nietzsche is a subtle thinker, he wasn't so much attempting to reduce human motivation to power. He was attempting to redefine what it was that we conceptualized as power. Whereas that isn't what the deconstructionists are doing at all, because fundamentally they're Marxists, and they believe that, you know, they've ensconced themselves within an economic viewpoint, where, within a philosophical viewpoint, where economics is paramount, and where all that matters is power construed as socioeconomic domination, fundamentally. You know, and that's in turn is embedded in metaphysics that's even deeper, which is a metaphysics that presumes that people are fundamentally materialists. And all of those things are all of those things are highly questionable.